introduction, Roslyn. I'm truly honored to be your MC for the night. Thank you for all for joining us this evening. We would like to thank Dr. Marianne Schwartz, our Brno class of 1962, who is delighted to support the speaker series. This series offers enriching educational experiences beyond the classroom to meet new role models and to expand students' view of future career and community involvement possibilities. This series was born out of Marianne desire to provide funding for the CAE and to provide experiences for students through events where women leaders discuss their life experiences. This evening, we have three powerful, inspiring, and impressive women who will share their stories of how they succeeded in their organizations and communities. Our panelists will be Dr. Shakia Curtis, Dr. Nadia Johnson, and Dr. Tasha Thompson. Now, I would like to introduce Tia Bowman Institute scholar Dorian Tellis, who will tell you more about our panelists and moderate discussion this evening. Dorian, who will graduate this month. Clap it up for her. Is a business and management major with a minor in community engagement activism. She is also the secretary of the Black Student Government. Please welcome Dorian.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. I sound amazing. So to introduce our panelists, Dr. Shakia Curtis, who is Alverno class of 2017. In her roles as peak performance coach, licensed financial advisor, certified personal trainer, and health coach, Dr. Curtis empowers women professionals and young visionaries. As a peak performance coach, Dr. Curtis collaborates with organizations to craft innovative strategies for growth and culture transformation. Her expertise in emotional intelligence empowers individuals personally and professionally. These efforts are core to her firm, The Pink Hustle. Dr. Curtis pioneers wealth management and entrepreneurship, igniting generational legacies. As a first generation wealth builder, she embodies the transformation she advocates by leading individuals by generational constraints and helping foster limitless potential. She leads these efforts by empowering women in health and wealth in partnership. With her legacy, her fitness, and finances, please welcome Dr. Curtis. Our next panelist is Dr. Nadia Johnson, CEO of Jet Constellations. Dr. Johnson's passion for diversity in STEM fueled the launch of her company, Jet Constellations, a Milwaukee based technology company, in 2017. Jet Constellations' social impact initiative, the Milky Way Tech Hub, functions to promote racial diversity in the tech industry through STEM education and entrepreneurship programming, as well as building a nurturing ecosystem of diverse techs and entrepreneurs. Dr. Johnson focuses on educational and technological investments, and she aspires to one day replicate the model in other communities around the U.S. Dr. Johnson is also a professor in the Computer Science Department at Marquette University. Please welcome Dr. Johnson. And our final panelist, Dr. Stacia Thompson, President and CEO, Officer of Sherman Phoenix Foundation. Dr. Thompson manages operations for the Sherman Phoenix Marketplace. More than 60% of the businesses at the Sherman Phoenix are women-led, and almost all of the businesses are owned by people of color. Dr. Thompson has expertise in community development, program development, entrepreneurial services, and economic development. Please welcome Dr. Thompson. So for the beginning of our questions, these questions will be open to anyone, so please feel free to answer, and I am always more than willing to repeat a question. So our first question is, how would you define leadership, and what does it entail, particularly from your perspective?
Mic check, 1, 2. All right, Lisa, how do we define leadership? Test.
Hello.
Since I said mic check first. I would say you define leadership by the impact influence that you have on individuals. I feel there's a lot of leaders, but very few who can have influence and impact, and being able to understand what's needed for those that are following. So I would say that's leadership to me.
I think for me, at least so far in my career, leadership has been defined by being a visionary, being able to imagine possibilities for communities, for a group of people, for yourself, and then find a way to get others to see that vision and believe in it enough to want to follow it and see it through.
And for me, leadership has been being able to lead as well as follow, or to also listen. Because as a leader, even though you are supposedly in power, you also have to learn how to listen to those around you and to find the people that can lead with you and not behind you, but together. Because most of my successes, 90% of my successes in my career have come from collaboration, partnerships, and complementing what others do. So learning to lead as well as follow at the same time.
Our next question is, in your experience, how do you address resistance to your leadership role due to gender, and what tactics do you use to overcome such obstacles?
So I would say, so my background, I was in higher education for 20 years, and I was, I got my first leadership role before I was 30 years old, and at the time, the higher ed landscape was very male-dominated, especially at the institutions I was at, especially in the division that I worked in, and sometimes, I was once called pit bull in a chihuahua body, and it was for a reason, because somebody tried to back me in a corner, and I had to bark my way out. So sometimes it's standing your ground, learning how what to do professionally, and ways to navigate that environment as well, when you are like backed up against the wall, because men think that they are the sound off end all, really don't know what they're talking about, but we fix it anyway. But also learning sometimes, something I teach my mentees is learning how to manage your manager, which sometimes was making them think the idea was theirs. Sometimes it was just maybe having to give extra explanations, because making sure that my voice is being heard, and those I was advocating that their voices were being heard as well.
I'd add just being yourself. I think is really important, and nobody can be you. And so the more that you lean into your authentic self, the more that you're going to show up in a way that you'll be able to uniquely contribute to that space. Being in what's considered a white male-dominated field, technology, I have been faced with all kinds of barriers related to both my race and gender. And what I have found to be useful is to remind myself regularly of who I am. So that when I walk into those spaces, I show up as that person, and the idea is that those individuals respect that. So I do my best not to shape shift into anybody else or to what perhaps the standard might be. My idea is to go into a room and set that standard. There is this saying that I've kept with me for a while now. You want to be the coffee bean. Has anybody ever heard that? So in hot water, boiling hot water, a carrot gets soft. In boiling hot water, an egg gets hard. And in boiling hot water, what does the coffee bean do? It changes the water. So I think that it's important for us to remember that, hey, we're unique, right? We all bring our unique assets to a room, and let's be the coffee bean. Let's change the room in the best kind of way.
I would echo everything that was said. I I think I would have said the same thing with learning how to be authentically me. I call that my superpower, walking into a room and understanding no one can do what I can do. And so, again, I share the same experiences, male dominated, most of the time, only woman, only black woman, naturally aggressive. I'm naturally a person that will make sure that I'm heard, but also understanding sometimes the fight is not necessary, right? So understanding when it is and when it's not, but authentically showing up and using my superpower, which is being myself. And again, echoing that, but that has been kind of my lead way of just understanding the battles that are worth it and that are not, and showing up as need be.
As community leaders, how do you ensure inclusivity and diversity are central to decision-making processes and initiatives?
Sometimes we just have to make sure, I always say your network is your net worth, right? So it's who you know, who can lobby on your behalf, who can speak well on your name, even in rooms that you're not in. So you sometimes have to make your presence known in the circles that you know are decision makers, and then share with them some of your ideas, but also to help others become inclusive. Sometimes it's educating the others of how inclusion benefits them, and why, sometimes it's even showing how the shared resources or like I said, doing complementary work or doing collaborative work, how, being inclusion is, it's the way of the world. And some may not realize it just yet, but by, using your voice, standing on the things that you believe in, and knowing that if you are in those circles too, if you're like, so for instance, I would say for myself is, because I sit on a different board or something, I feel like, as Dr. Curtis, sometimes being the only woman, the only person of color, it's my job then to advocate for all the others, and not just maybe Black women, but just BIPOC, LGBTQ+, all the underrepresented groups. Sometimes if we are that only person at the table, we have to take that time to make sure we're advocating for all of those who are underrepresented.
Yeah. I agree. And I would also add, for me, I'm big on collaboration, big on partnerships. I understand one person can make something happen, but two, and then you create a group, then you can create a movement. And so looking at the right partnerships with diversified perspectives that are willing to learn, I think I'm in a space of no longer trying to change the mindset of people, but working with those who are wanting to change has been kind of my guidance on, like, how do I create this inclusivity, but also looking for change makers to work with me in that and bring them along. So if I am the only woman at the table, the only person of color, like, how do I get a person that looks like me involved? How can I let them know about resources and opportunities? How can I get them to networking events? A lot of times it's about exposure. And how can I be that person that's exposing these opportunities so that inclusivity is included, but also just partnerships and relationships. Mm-hmm.
So my job as founder of a leading tech hub in the Midwest is to ensure that as the tech ecosystem continues to grow and thrive, that Black, Latina, First Nation, women, those who traditionally are not always represented in the tech space, my job is to make sure that inclusion and equity is at the forefront. But the reality is that diversity is a fact, right? You look around this room, it's a diverse room. I like to say that inclusion is a choice and equity takes effort. So I go to spaces and I find that if I go into a room at this point and there's no diversity, it feels like somebody made a choice to not include people. So I have the conversation, I point it out, but to Dr. Shakia's point, you have to pick and choose where to put your energy. And quickly, I was able to decipher what sort of organizations, what sort of individuals actually do want to be a part of the change. And then from there, instead of begging for a seat at a table where folks maybe don't even want my voice, create your own table. I like to joke and say the Milky Way Tech Hub is code for make your own table. And so I am a huge advocate of individuals starting new groups, starting new organizations, and then creating spaces, making the right decision, the right choices to be as inclusive as possible and making the effort to be as equitable as possible. Sometimes it's necessary to create new spaces and new tables, and that's how we see the change that we want to see.
Okay, so for our next set of questions, I've curated some different ones for each of you guys individually, but I do implore you all, if you feel compelled to speak, feel free. So for Dr. Thompson, as an individual with deep connections to the community, through your work and the staff that you have at Sherman Phoenix, could you elaborate on some pivotal leadership strategies that you've enacted in your organization, and how have they bolstered your achievements?
Sure. So coming out of higher ed and working in student affairs, I have always been a proponent of professional development. And so what I know about my team is we're only as strong as our weakest link. So one of the first things I did as a leader when I was able to be be in charge of the budget, I made sure there were line items for professional development for my team, because one of my mentors when I was working for him, he told all of us, if you work for me longer than 2 years, that's by your choice. That's not because I made you stay here. So he wanted to create professional development opportunities for us, whether it was conferences, additional certifications, whether it was creating opportunity for whatever that next thing for us is or was in our profession. What he taught me was to create those opportunities for my staff, and it makes us stronger as a team. It makes our programming stronger, and it gives them confidence, and then they are going to give more because those opportunities were made for them. When I had 2 new staff start this year, and just to give to help us be a team. And because I don't ever say somebody works for me, I always say they work with me, because it's empowering, because words have power. And just even the way you talk and interact with people, there's power in that. And so what I did with this new staff is I did what's called a DISC assessment. Dr. Curtis can probably tell you what that DISC means. But pretty much, we did DISC assessment, and we had a professional come in and actually do team building with us right away when the 2 new staff started, so that we could learn from each other, learn our quirks, learn how what makes us tick, and learn who does what in what way and why they do it that way, so that we can work better together. So the one thing I can say as a leader to work with a team like that is to do that, build from within, empower them, create opportunities for whatever it is next for them, and make sure that they have those opportunities where those opportunities present themselves.
Dr. Curtis, as an individual whose background is esteemed as one of the top up-and-coming coaches in Milwaukee, how do you adjust your leadership approach to effectively navigate the ever-changing landscape and seize emerging opportunities?
What I will say, I used to be ashamed of my upbringing, right? Single mom, raised in Westline Projects. But I now look at that as one of the greatest things for me, because I became adaptive. I've learned how to consistently grow and have adversity and understand challenges will always be there, but how do I navigate through that, right? And so when you ask, like, how do I continuously grow and emerge in these different realms, it is that. It is remembering things will continuously change. How do I stay learning? There will continuously be new challenges, like how do I learn how to continuously grow and persevere? And so for me, I'm continuously learning. I'm continuously having mentors. I'm continuously being in spaces where women and different people empower me, but also learning from those that I'm around, right? I'm only as good as I am with those that surround me. And although it's an honor to hear like an upcoming coach, it is learning life lessons that have allowed me to share those experiences and to help others build So I lean heavily on the foundational principles, but I'm also never scared to go after something new. If I see an opportunity, I don't care if it don't look like I fit the bill. I'm going to go after it and figure out how to fit the bill once I get there. And so that's one of the things that have got me there, and one of the reasons I would encourage everybody in the room to go after what they say you can't, right? I'm always going after, oh, you said I can't? Okay, let me show you. So I'll say that's part of the bigger reason, yeah.
Dr. Johnson, I understand that you are the visionary behind the Milky Way Hub. Could you please provide some insight into the nature of this initiative? And additionally, could you discuss the strategies and resources that you utilize to penetrate the markets that are frequently male-dominated?
Yep. So I launched Milky Way Tech Hub in 2017, really as a response to hearing that there were different organizations, corporations coming together to shape this narrative that the city of Milwaukee would be this renowned tech hub, which at the time was great. You know, you hear that and you're like, this is awesome for the city. But if you have my background, you knew at that time, you type the words Black and Milwaukee, some of the worst kind of statistics popped up. Okay, you'd see headlines that said Milwaukee is the worst place for Black people to live, to raise their children, right? So in my eyes, here I am, 2017, you know, fresh graduate, just got my big girl job at GE Healthcare, ready to take on the tech world, and I'm seeing kind of like a tale of two cities, okay? And I didn't want that to be. And so I started Milky Way Tech Hub, the social impact arm to my for-profit, to realize a different vision, that the city of Milwaukee is not just any regular tech hub, right, but one that centers equity and justice and leveraging technology so that the majority of people, we call this a minority-majority city, can benefit from this tech hub narrative. And so that's why I created Milky Way Tech Hub. We focus on three main pillars: STEM education and workforce, entrepreneurship, and community. And the way that I've been able to navigate this tech ecosystem space, to grow this brand with, you know, a lot less money than some of my competitors or other leading organizations, is by being creative. I mentioned earlier the importance of being your authentic self. If I tried to do the same thing that, you know, my competitors or neighboring tech hubs were doing, I would have fell flat on my face. So I leaned into what I was good at. And what am I good at as a Black woman that grew up on 6th and 7th and Walnut? I'm creative. I love art. As you mentioned, I see myself as a visionary. And I have, I've been told at least, a higher EQ. And I was able to sort of put all that stuff together and take on a different take on technology. So instead of focusing on, you know, IT and having a basic type of logo, I gave it a space vibe, okay? Milky Way. If you Google Milky Way Tech Hub, you're gonna see a UFO that I drew. Everybody keeps begging me to change the logo, but it's a reminder of where I came from, right? And you know, I wanted people to see what if Milwaukee was known as the Milky Way? Technology ecosystem that was led by people of color, that's led by women, that's creative. What if people outside of Milwaukee, instead of seeing it as the worst place for Black people to live and raise their children, saw it as a place where Black people can live and thrive in the field of technology? It was the place that was called the Milky Way. And so I think it's just a matter of taking all of the things that I felt I was good at and finding a way to uniquely contribute to the ecosystem.
Dr. Thompson, as a member of the C-suite, it's apparent that leadership frequently entails grappling with some challenging decisions. How do you approach ethical quandaries or conflicting interests while upholding the integrity of your organization?
Absolutely. So what I've often told people as I'm in leadership roles is sometimes that the decisions that I have to make may not be popular. They may not be felt by everyone and might not make everybody happy. But what I am going to do is always make the decision of what's best for the greater good or what's best for the organization. And while I may not benefit everyone, as long as I'm able to look at myself in the mirror, as long as I'm able to, go to sleep at night without a guilty conscience, that I know that I'm not going to show up on the news for something illegal, or it's not going to affect anything I do. That's kind of the viewpoint that I look to when I'm making decisions. Try not to make hasty decisions. I kind of do, I do something that I call a stoplight, even with our programming. And the stoplight is after a program is over, or in the middle, or halfway through, get those around me, so it's not always just my decision either, because like I said, I'm affecting others and what others do. So the sociologist in me believes in evaluation, believes in getting feedback. So I'll do a stoplight, and that stoplight is red. Okay, what should we stop doing? What's not serving us anymore? What is just not working? What's not good? Yellow, what should we slow down on? What should we stop and think about? Is there something we need to pivot, and go in a different direction? And the green is just go. What's going well, what are areas where those that we are serving are best being served, or what are some, low-hanging fruit, or some things that we're having really good outcomes in. One of the things that I just did is I worked actually with a graduate student from American University, and she came in and helped us create an evaluation tool, which I was ever so happy to get some help with that, because what she did is she created an evaluation tool, because we have a unique set of things to evaluate at Sherman Phoenix, because we not only serve entrepreneurs, but we also serve the community with community impact program as well as entrepreneurial programming. So what she did was helped us create an evaluation tool in which we can evaluate the impact of everything that we do. So if there's something that's not serving, it's, if it's self-serving for me and just because I like it, but I'm not the one that is there to look for the services and says they need help. So this evaluation tool, we were able to do a survey as well as a focus group and get real time. And I wasn't there because I didn't want to inform anybody's decision, or that they were going to be afraid to talk in front of me. So what we were able to do is with that evaluation tool is really look at what areas are we having impact in, and then based on the results from that the research tool that she made, now I can do my stoplight based on the research, based on the feedback, based on feedback from those that are currently in our programs, or have been in our programs before, or have been tenants in our building. Like, what should we stop? What is not working? What components that we're offering and spending money on are people not using, but we're continuing to spend money on it? So really, I take pride in being able to make informative decisions and not making decisions, not taking things personal, and not being self-serving, but really thinking of the greater good of the organization.
Dr. Curtis, as an associate lecturer, I'm confident that you recognize the significance of continuous learning and personal growth for leaders. How do you foster and facilitate the professional development of your team members, students, or fellow community leaders?
Lead by example, right? Again, what I will say is I love learning, always learning. And I feel that you should always be surrounded by people who are curious, right? So how do I foster that curiosity in students sitting in the classroom, but also my peers, my team members? Like, we need to consistently ask questions. Just because someone is in authority doesn't make it right? Like, just because someone is telling you something, how do we question that? How do we continuously learn? And so forever, one, encouraging others to want to learn, two, being a leader and making sure that I'm always educating myself, surrounding myself in spaces that will stretch me, challenge me, teach me, but again, pulling up others with me. So that, I would say that. And with my students, one of the reasons that I was right on time today is that reason. I was challenged. They challenged me. They were doing a presentation, and so it became hey, we did research and had to further go into detail about a business concept, but it was in that moment where I had to give them that floor to show me what they were saying was we had two different opinions on. And so versus shutting that down, it's allowing that to be explored and saying, okay, if you don't believe that I'm telling you the right concept, then let's explore it together. And so again, creating that curiosity, but being open to when you're challenged by it, like how do I react to it? Empowering others to continue to learn, and then continuously being stretched. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Johnson, as a self-proclaimed community STEM advocate, what role do you see technology playing in communities of color, and how do you leverage tech to advance your community?
Well, with the advancement of artificial intelligence, which I'm sure everybody has heard at least about in the last year or so, I think that it is extremely important that communities of color, especially, educate themselves, become more aware, and figure out how it plays a role in their very, very near future. I have the great opportunity of going into different schools and kind of seeing how AI is being introduced to different spaces. And it's sometimes like day and night where there's curriculum in one school, same day I'll visit. Curriculum in one school, they're learning about AI, language models, ChatGPT, how to use it. And there's another school I'll visit, okay, closer to my house, and it's prohibited. They can't use it at all. And that challenges me in a number of ways, but I feel that educating ourselves on how technology is impacting our world today and in the near future is going to be really, really critical in terms of closing the economic gaps and the wealth gaps. And so how I'm leveraging technology, well, building programming these days within the Milky Way Tech Hub. So programming within schools. Tomorrow I have the honor of spending 3 hours with about 70 or so students at Discovery World, and having them pitch to me about how they use data science to benefit the city of Milwaukee. Next week, I think it's next week, I'll be participating in the graduation of individuals who are currently going through a program that Milky Way Tech Hub supports in a correctional facility where they learn about AI and how to best use it when they're ready to reintegrate into society. So these are sort of ways that I am working to educate, bring awareness around technology, artificial intelligence, language models to support our communities. AI is being leveraged these days for facial recognition. Judges are able to use models to understand recidivism rates for specific people. AI is being used to determine who gets the house based off of credit scores or based off of zip codes. And there's a lot of biases that are built in. Why? Because there's not a lot of representation in the data science space. So the more that we educate ourselves, the more that we bring awareness, the more that there's more representation in the field of AI, the better for our communities.
Dr. Curtis, having served as a former manager and member of growth and engagement, brings some valuable insights into the significance of establishing trust for effective leadership. Could you elaborate on your methods that you employ to cultivate and sustain trust among your team or your community members?
So I'll use an example of if you work for someone you don't trust and what that looks like, and then kind of build that in. So imagine coming into an institution, you're excited, and you want to help this institution grow, and you're bringing in all of the great ideas, and you realize the leadership that you're serving doesn't believe in what you're doing, right? What does that do to you? That takes away the excitement, that makes you not want to contribute. You lose hope. You really kind of come to work and collect a check, right? So imagine on the other side, you come to an institution, you're excited about your ideas, you want to help grow, and then you have a team and a leadership that's helping you to foster that. What does that create, right? And so being in both of those experiences multiple times in kind of my career, I've learned to look at what has worked and allowed me and others to foster, and that is allowing people to come in with their ideas, with their initiatives, and build a supportive foundation of what does that look like. And so for me, when I was in that position, my goal was how do I create collaboration, but foster this community and this culture where you can trust that your ideas will be heard. It does not guarantee they will be executed, but you will be heard. You will be able to explore opportunities, be a part of things in opportunities. But that does not mean that every idea that comes to the table will happen. And so giving individuals that opportunity to show up at the table, to allow their voices to be heard, and to sometimes contribute to things they don't agree with so that they can see the other picture is what creates that community. And so that's what I did. I learned to foster around what worked, including everyone that was involved, because that's how you build trust. Pulling in my community to organizations that, if you're serving the community, who should be at the table? The community, right? And so understanding if you're serving different individuals, different constituents, everyone that you're serving should also have a voice. So that was when I was in that role of things that I made sure that I did.
Dr. Johnson, as the host of MKE Tech Hub, the podcast where you engage with industry experts to explore strategies for diversifying STEM fields, it's evident that you value collaboration and communication in leadership. How do you cultivate an environment that encourages collaboration and transparent communication within the community where you work?
So my podcast, MKE Tech, started because I wanted to amplify different voices. And I think that podcasting is one way to do it. I feel like everybody has a podcast these days. But it's really about having conversations. And I'll be honest with you, I've not always been the best at networking. I've not always been the best at putting myself out there. In fact, it's my first corporate job was at GE Healthcare, full time. And I remember at one point in time, I would get nervous. You know, how they say go around and say your name, and I literally would my hands would be sweating, and I'm like, what's my name? What did I major in? All that stuff, right? So I had to really work on myself to get to a point where I could communicate effectively, but more importantly, to communicate so that I could foster collaboration. There's this show, I think it's based on HBO, called Insecure. Anybody ever heard of Insecure? It's kind of a grown-up show. But it was directed and produced by a woman named Issa Rae. And I watched an interview of hers, and she said instead of networking vertically, trying to network up, network horizontally. And I think that that's really key. And that is how I've been able to foster collaborations, not always trying to find some CEO at some big tech company that could not be further removed from the things that I'm trying to do. But it was really finding individuals that had the same sort of appetite and hustle and came from similar backgrounds, or at least had some similarities, understood where I was coming from, was ready to put the work in. So that's really how I've been able to foster collaboration. And MKE Tech Podcast is just one way where I can have these really transparent conversations, amplify the voices of individuals that typically aren't heard, but then also sort of break that, stereotype that there aren't Black people in tech. I think that's one thing that I'm trying to work against, because even though there needs to be more representation of women and people of color, we exist, right? And so there are, I won't say many, but there are Black-led tech startups in the city of Milwaukee, in the state of Wisconsin, in the Midwest. And so I use my podcast to really amplify those voices and to bring about that sort of change.
So this last question I left to be last because I wanted everyone to be able to answer this question. So what advice would you offer to aspiring leaders who aspire to make meaningful impacts within their organizations and communities?
I would always say remember your why. Remember why you started. Remember why you're so passionate about it. Remember who you're doing it for. I would say, I shared earlier, is look at the bigger picture. And sometimes the decisions you have to make aren't going to be popular, but if it's going to be the right decision for the organization or those that you are serving. I would say also you know, like Dr. Johnson said earlier, be your authentic self. Show up as you. Show up as, because there's only one you. So show up as your authentic self in your role, and find a role that I always, you know, is corny, call it what you want, cliche. You know, if you find a passion, you'll never work a day in your life. If you know, if I can be I am a storyteller. So like I always share the stories that, you know, I started out working at CNH Capital in a corporate. And every morning I used to think of a reason to call in sick. I didn't want to be there. And little divine intervention, and I got a role at a community center in which I was able to be a pre-college coordinator. It was the best decision I ever made to leave and start that, and look where I am now. And I get to live out my passion in what I do. So I don't go to work every day. I'm living in my passion and in my work and in my legacy. I'm building a legacy for what I've done for the last 20-some years.
I would add to that, learn who you are. Like, learn who you truly are. Learn what your value add is, so that when you walk into rooms, you don't try to change up. Understand, again, you are the superpower to any room. There is only one you. And I believe like that is the foundation of leadership, because a lot of times I feel that people transition to what they feel people need versus continuously being who they are and adding in that value add. So I would say that I would also add to understand the purpose, but also think generationally. A lot of times we're thinking for the right now. So I was a mom very young, so I didn't have an opportunity not to think about what's next and what legacy am I leaving and what is this trail blazing? Like, who's coming after me? I've always had to be responsible for that little girl looking at me, and that's how I think. What does this next step do for her that's coming behind me? So to understand who you are, to understand your value add, but to also understand that that trail you're blazing, right, is for someone else. What does that legacy and impact look like?
The advice that I'd give you all is very similar to what Dr. Shakia said. Just constantly learn more and more about yourself. The reality is in 5 years, you're not hopefully going to be who you are today. You're going to have grown, right? And so I think that it's important to check in with yourself regularly. I do this regularly. Figure out what your interests are. What are you good at? Explore different fields, and embrace the reality that you are multifaceted. So I know that, you know, we sometimes can get one track, tunnel vision. I want to do this with my life. There are multiple things that you can do with your life. You can have multiple purposes. This, in the next 5 years, you can set out to go to grad school, or maybe be a lawyer, or whatever it is, a neurosurgeon. That's going to take at least 7 years, right? And then 5 years after that, you could decide maybe you want to do a tech startup, or maybe you want to start selling your art, right? I tell people all the time, tech is not it for me. I know people like to think that it might be because I'm really into it right now. I might become someone who writes books real soon, okay? Or I might be someone who wants to get into film production, and that's perfectly fine. And that's because I'm exploring myself regularly. So I think that that's really, really important. Something more tactical, I would use ChatGPT or one of the AI bots that's out there, Claude or Gemini. Use it as an agent, okay, your own personal agent. 10 years ago, if I woke up and said, I want to be the top venture capitalist of the Midwest, I would have to go find somebody that looks the exact opposite of me, if you catch my drift, and I hope and pray that they would mentor me, right? That's not necessarily the case today. If I created an agent with one of these bots, I could ask very specific questions, see it as a mentor, see it as a genie if you have the right prompt, okay? So I would do that right away, and that would help you to understand, like, based off of your interest, how to navigate that. And then I think surround yourself with people that inspire you. So this is a special event I was mentioning to someone because this is the first time that I've publicly been called Dr. Johnson. Thank you. But to be on a panel with Dr. Thompson and Dr. Shakia, it's like a dream come true because I've seen these women and the impact that they're making in community. And it just reminds me of like, okay, this is some of the benefits of hard work to be sharing a stage with these incredible women. And so I think surrounding yourself or even just finding individuals that inspire you is really, really important. There's a woman that doesn't know me at all. Her name is Morgan DeBon. I've taken pictures with her as a fan. She doesn't know me. But I follow her on Instagram. I like what she's doing with Blavity, with Afrotech, and I aspire to be similar to Morgan DeBon. Find someone that inspires you in the same way that can help you to kind of get a sense of where you want to see yourself in the next 5 years.
I just want to add one thing because both what you said triggered me also is surround yourself, so find a personal board of directors. But the other thing is you have to realize sometimes man's no is a guy's not right now. And in my professional experience, there were roles that I just knew were mine. How could they not choose me? I was a shoo-in. I was a finalist, and the job was given to someone else. And that's been my trajectory for like 2 or 3 of my roles. And I didn't get those roles, but then 3-6 months later, something better came along that I didn't have to interview for, that I was chosen for, or that I did interview for, but there was no question who, was going to be chosen. And then I've gotten to the point where I was being recruited to jobs. So just remember, sometimes patience is truly a virtue, and just being patient, and where you land, there's some divine intervention, everything, and you're going to land where you're supposed to be.
And learn. Be learning while you're being patient. Continuously learn. Always learn.
Well, I'd just like to thank you ladies for an amazing panel. Thank you for allowing me to be your moderator.
Great job.
Thank you. I'm leaving. There's a Q&A. That was my bad.
Sorry.
That was my bad.
Okay. So, panelists, thank you for sharing your stories and information with us. Dorian, thank you for moderating the discussion. So, before you guys escape, everybody gonna have the chance to ask our panelists any questions
Hello?
or comment that you guys want to add. So, anybody want to ask our panelists any questions or comments that you found? Oh, we have one.
She's so excited. We have one.
Hello. Okay. Hello, my name is Julissa Quevedo. I'm currently a freshman here in Alverno, and actually a little while ago, I actually was a panelist for an AP Spanish Literature segment that my high school asked me to be a part of. And while I was there, I came across, I was telling the students, take AP Spanish Lit. It's a really fun opportunity, especially if you want to double major and as bilingual students, because my high school is predominantly Hispanic. It's Carmen. So, I just really want them to have the opportunity to use their bilingualism as a privilege and to, show the world that, we can be part of, the business realm or anywhere that's underrepresented. But I just saw that how, disappointed they were sometimes. So some students just felt like they just were never going to be able to be in those positions. So what is your thoughts on, this generation? Do you have any thoughts on how can they, self-esteem wise, how can they improve that? Just so, they just never see a future for themselves. And that kind of makes me sad, but it's the reality sometimes with underrepresented groups. So what type of advice would you give them?
First thing I always say is involvement and mentorship. I mean, you going back, that's a start. Start bringing more people with you. Bring them to campus with you so that because the biggest thing is exposure and access. So, your counterparts, they are being exposed to college campuses in elementary school, middle school. So what if you could do that same exposure for those that you're looking to mentor, or those that you are looking to say, yes, you can do this, and bring them here so they can see rooms of people like this and say that, oh, you know what? I look like the people in this room. Yes, I can do this. So it's about exposure. Like there's an event coming up called STEAM and Dream, and it's about exposing Black and brown kids to STEAM and STEM opportunities, and they're going to see other kids that look like them, walk like them, talk like them, and doing these activities and being engaged. So part of it is doing whatever you can to the best of your ability to get them engaged, get them involved, and get them exposed.
Hello, I'm Jen. My question is one around something that I've been talking about a lot this semester, which is burnout. I know a lot of people have experienced it, especially this semester. We had really weird breaks, and I noticed some of my classmates have kind of been feeling it towards the end here in our finals. And I know the obvious answer is to rest. And I see rest as being productive because you literally need it. It's one of your physiological needs. But we don't always have the opportunity to rest. So my question is, when you can't, is there something that you do to kind of prop yourself up until you can rest? Is there mantras? Is there someone you look up to, or something else that you do to help yourself keep going on?
So I'm going to jump in because I am slightly on a sabbatical, still working. But I took the beginning of the year and rested because I've been working since I was 14 years old. I'm not going to tell you how old I am. But I think sometimes we tell ourselves we can't rest when you have to rest. Rest is very productive. Rest is productivity. And we have this hustle culture that is not always the best or beneficial. Yes, you could do things, work out. Yes, you can do things where you eat right and you balance your schedule. But if your body is saying you're burning out, then sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, right? And I think that's what we have to be able to tell ourselves. It's okay to rest. It's okay to be mentally exhausted. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to say, I can't do this. There's mental breaks and having to call in for a mental health day because that's real, right? And so I'm a very big advocate. I left for 30 days, and I know a lot of people can't do this, but again, I've been working since 14. And I left out of the country for 30 days and rested, right? And I come back, and I'm here now, and June 1st is kind of when I go back into full force. But I was telling myself I couldn't rest. The world will continue to tell you to go until you tell yourself that you no longer can. So yes, you can rest. Yes, you could take a mental health day. Yes, it's okay to literally sit, do nothing, and give yourself that time to recalibrate.
Can I just add? I'm a recovering workaholic. So in the 2010s, both of us, yeah. In the 2010s, like when I was just starting college, there was on Instagram it was like a hustle culture, right? Like you see those memes, like asleep when I'm dead type of stuff, and I would repost it. I look back on this, well, what was happening in my brain to think that I was cool? You know what I mean? Like keep hustling, grind culture, rise and grind. All right, don't ever say that to me anymore, because I've educated myself. The reality is that we only have this one body, right? And I think that we have to unlearn some of the things that we've been taught in the past. And it might be a little controversial, but I'll say it. Rest is your divine right. And you are worth more than productivity as it relates to capitalism. I learned that, right? Just existing is enough, okay? So if you have a thought in your head that I cannot rest, stop it. I mean, you cannot afford to not rest is the new thought. School is always going to be here. I know that we have these realities, right? Like I'm not like out of it, right? I just got finished with writing a dissertation, and it was crazy, and I had a deadline, right? I get deadlines, and also um, the reality is, again, you only have the one body. And so there were times where I had to check in with myself. Do I work today or not? And if the answer is no, the answer is no, I'm not working today. And I will say kudos to the Gen Zers, because as a professor, I receive emails where people regularly say, I'm taking a mental health day. And I'm like, bet, okay. I wish I had that sort of mentality when I was in college, because I mean, I don't think I would have ever wrote a professor saying I'm taking a mental health day. I get that more often than not. And so I think that older generations can learn from younger generations who are prioritizing mental health. Your mental health and your physical wellness comes first. I don't have now one mantra for you if you're trying to push through something your body's telling you to rest. The mantra is lay down.
Yeah. I was gonna say, and we are no good to those that we serve if we don't take care of ourselves first.
Yep.
Because reality is, like, even the job or where you're volunteering, they will have that job reposted, and you
So
ain't been in
quick.
6 feet under for 5 minutes. Take care of yourself. I remember one of my supervisors. I told him right away. I said, just so you know, I take mental health days. They are not vacation days. They will be considered sick days, and it's just as much for you as it is for me. Because if you want me to continue to be productive and not, hit that wall where I'm just, out of it, I need this. And I call my mental health days, I call it the power of the PJs, because I probably won't get out of my pajamas, or I have this really cool hooded blanket that I got from Amazon, and I sit on the couch and I watch mindless TV all day. And it's just taking a break. Because sometimes any of you and my colleagues here, you feel yourself about to hit that wall, or you feel yourself where it's getting to that point. So take care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. I have a therapist, and she gives me assignments, and part of her assignments is she had to teach me how to say no, that everything isn't serving for me. So no is a sentence. Mm-hmm. Period. No period. Exclamation point. Whatever you want to put at the end of it, not except for a question mark. But no, no is a sentence. And the one thing that I had to learn, because I've worked myself sick twice. The first time, I ended up on bed rest for the weekend. My blood pressure shot up. This is when I was during my doctoral journey. And I thought I had the flu, went to the doctor, and they did a blood pressure, and the nurse just came back to me, and it was a friend of mine, and she just said, we got to call your doctor. And the second time was I actually ended up with pneumonia in Jamaica. I was trying to be on vacation, but I had worked myself. I had waited too long to take that trip, and I ended up in a Jamaican hospital. So that was interesting. But I say that to say, take care of yourself, because your mental can affect your physical, your emotion can affect your physical. Do what you have to do to take care of yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally.
And then if I could also just add to, I guess, for the students, tea over coffee, because coffee can really make you lose a little bit, at least especially if you're petite like me. So I would say green tea over coffee, and also, like, where are you putting your energy? Because, like, be mindful, like, who's really, like, giving you energy or taking it. Mm-hmm. And I had to really start to monitor that for myself, like, these boys, like, maybe just put it on pause if you have to, like, finish a final or something like that, right? Like, monitor where you're putting your energy to if you can't rest.
And delegate.
You love coffee.
Dr. Johnson, I was wondering earlier, you just mentioned that you were at GE Healthcare. Why did you decide to shift? I'm over here, sorry. Why did you decide to leave corporate life and launch your own business?
I launched my business while I was in corporate. I had mentioned to you guys earlier that I was like a scared bunny rabbit, couldn't even barely remember my name, right? And I had worked on myself so much while I was at GE Healthcare, because I was in a leadership program. And so they put me in spaces where I could grow. So I told my boss, I don't like to speak in public. She said, great, we're going to have you lead these top calls with these executives. She said, we're going to put you in Toastmasters. We're going to have you lead global teams. We're going to have you shipped out to India so you can do X, Y, Z. I put myself in these really uncomfortable positions so that I can grow. I went in there like a scared bunny rabbit, and I came out like a dragon, okay? in a good way, in the best way a dragon can be. But once I got to that point, in in that 4 years at GE, I started to realize these executives put on their pants one leg at a time, and what they're doing, I feel like I could do. And then I'll just be transparent with you all. Once 2020 hit and we got into that whole George Floyd era, I was being called to talk about the Black experience in front of people, and that became exhausting. And so I just decided now's a good time for me to prioritize rest. And so I exited stage left and took on my business full time.
Hi, my name is Georgia. I'm graduating in May.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I have a question for you guys because you guys are all really successful and I'm sure how to climb the ladder tooth and nail kind of in a way, especially being females. I find myself in the room being like the youngest because I want to go into healthcare and I keep striving to do that. So I always find myself being the youngest, applying to jobs or in the room or asking for promotions, and our generation is known to not want to work. And so a lot of people just assume because it's my generation that I don't have the work ethic, or even because I'm female I can't handle it. And I guess what's the advice that you can give somebody, especially me who's graduating, how to have those conversations, how to advocate for myself to continue to climb up the ladder, and I guess I don't know how to word it, but you know what I mean? Like basically that.
Mike is a hater. You want my mic?
1, 2, okay. I think you said the key word for me, first generation everything, and I think I would say for all of us, always the first in a lot of spaces, but advocacy and communication. I had to learn how to communicate my needs, but also listen to what I guess I want to say the disconnect was, so that I can understand what are you not seeing in me. And a lot of times I did still need to grow, right? A lot of times I did still need that mentorship, but I needed them to understand who I was and what I was trying to do. So for me, I would go in and say, hey, I'm coming into this position because I'm looking to grow. Is that an opportunity? Is there a growth track? Is there someone that can make sure that I'm hitting these pivotal points on these metrics and these KPIs, because the goal for me is to grow, right? And so coming in and understanding there's a plan, but also finding that leadership and that support, or understanding if the organization is even there to support that. A lot of times we have to make those decisions up front of when they're interviewing you, you need to interview them. Hey, I'm coming in to grow. Is that a possibility? Do you support young Gen Z women? Do you have people that look like me in these spaces? Because you have the opportunity in this space, in this arena, to really go to any organization right now if you have talent and willing to work to advocate for yourself. So as they're interviewing you, you interview for the space and then say, this is what I'm looking for. Can you provide this for me? Yeah.
Everything that she said, and the only thing that I will add is that ladder. Once you get to a certain point, girl, I lost that ladder. I don't care about that ladder. So I think I would write down, get a piece of paper, write down who you want to be, right? And then just start showing up as that person. Whether that be in your personal life, your professional life, start showing up and be so good that whatever sort of biases folks have about your generation, they can't apply it to you, right? In fact, you show up and you represent your generation well. And the reality is your generation, no matter what, so long as time exists, is going to be leading eventually. So I wouldn't worry about folks' bias. Everybody has something to say. But also, again, climbing up a ladder, you'll find is probably not as productive as reaching across the aisle.
Find somebody who can put you on an elevator or escalator instead of having to climb that ladder. Mm-hmm. Find your, we talked about earlier, your personal board directors and what that looks like. So my kitchen cabinet is my mom, because she's supportive. She helps me with my child. I have mentors. I have subject matter experts that maybe they're not very close to my circle, but they are the ones who, for the content or whatever, my next thing is, they've already done it or they've been through it, but they're part of my my professional cabinet. Then find those, like Nadia says, she has that person that she stands and that she aspires to be. There's things to be learned from there. So, sometimes, because I was there, I got tired of carrying that hammer, trying to break through a glass ceiling that was made not to be broken. And you have to also, you don't move or you don't change or you don't do it till you get uncomfortable. Like, Nadia had to get, Dr. Johnson had to get uncomfortable. You can't also be afraid to leave. I had to leave a role after broken promises and things that I just saw, I had planned on retiring from that organization, and I just saw an opportunity. In fact, I got recruited to a role, didn't fill out a job application for it. I went there, interviewed them, and the only reason I took the interview is because I wanted them to call and do a reference check at my other job so that they would see, oh, she don't leave, and what their counter would be. Well, they never called for a reference check. I never filled out the application until it was time to do my background check for them. And then I just kind of had an aha moment, like, maybe this is, it's time for me to go. And I had to, go and grow. And that's exactly what happened. And I was always, I don't know if it was fear, and sometimes people don't see your value until you leave. And then I had a mentor of mine where I'll never forget when there was a role I didn't get, and we went to lunch, and she told me, okay, I'm not telling you to do it, but she said what I had to do is, she said, I had to leave for them to see my value. And she left for 2 years, and then they recruited her and brought her back in a larger role. So sometimes you have to leave when you get uncomfortable and see that there's other things out there for you.
Yeah. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, because these corporations, they'll make you feel like, you have to climb this ladder, you have to work to be this executive, and we've got a 20-year track for you. That might not be the case, right? Like, learn as much, take as much as you can from that company that you're in as possible, learn as much, and then understand that there's so much more out there for you. I remember when I got to GE, there were folks who were there for, I remember I sat next to a guy, he was like, I've been here 38 years or something like that. And I was just like, oh, okay, congratulations, because that's what he wanted to do, right? But then he was like trying to tell me, like, this is how you have to be. You have to talk to these people. You have to be in these circles. And I was just like, I don't know that that's for me. And so it was the best advice that I was given during that time is like, what does success mean for me? And it didn't necessarily mean having $100,000+ plus. Once I got to that point, I looked around and I was like, this is what I was reaching for? And I took a pay cut to leave so that I could do something that better suited me. So, like, ask yourself, what does success look like for you? And then when you get into a space, you can evaluate and decide whether or not you want to persevere or pivot.
Hello. I just have a question. How do you balance education and experience? So, like, especially being a college student, your education is always kind of at the forefront, but then how do you also get that experience at the same time and, like, create a balance and create time and space for that?
Have you all ever watched the movie Higher Learning? Have you heard that? You're probably too young. I'm old. So there's a professor in that movie, Professor Phipps, and he has a quote. I actually just shared this. Is that the meaning behind and the purpose of university is to prepare you to think. I add on to that. In my opinion, coming out of higher ed, my master's degree is in student affairs, my doctorate is in higher ed teaching and learning, is that what we do, well, what y'all do now is higher ed. Unfortunately, I'm higher ed adjacent now, is to create opportunities to prepare you for what it's going to be like when you leave here, so what's going to happen in the real world. What I always loved about the technical college system is the practical education. So you had an instructor that was leading here, and Alverno does a lot of this too. So you had an instructor that was leading here, and then you go right into lab. So that practicality. So the balance for me of education and experience is, as an academic advisor, the things that I always encourage my students to do was, one, study abroad. Go experience, something that you've never experienced before and get that study abroad experience. 2 was work-based learning. So get that internship. Get the part-time job in the field that you plan on working in. When I was at Gateway, my nursing students, I always had all of them become, once they got to the point where they could, become LPNs, because reality is in the medical field, unfortunately, even though they were graduating past their NCLEX, there were some hospitals and stuff that didn't want to hire newly graduated nurses. But the ones that I suggested become LPNs, and they had that nursing experience, that when they passed their NCLEX, they were able to find roles, or they were able to stay at the the health provider that they were at and get promoted because now they'd finished their ADN. So I always say is be cognizant of what it is that you're looking to do, and whether that's volunteer experience, like I said, intern, paid experience. At this point, post high school, maybe those part-time jobs shouldn't be retail anymore, but go find those experiences that are going to help you grow and help you get your foot in the door for your field, because not only are you getting experience, but you are meeting people. And you're meeting people who can put you in places, even if it's not at that company. Guess what? They have circles of colleagues and friends and college friends and sorors and fraternity brothers, etc., that can put you in a place for that track that you're trying to go to.
And I would also add to everything Dr. Stacy just said, to join organizations, like professional organizations. I wish I would have did that much younger, right? To really you can get experience through that community, through attending some of those events, meeting people in those spaces to even decipher, like, is this the space or exposure that I'm looking for? And then going to conferences. I had the opportunity to do that a lot in my master's program. And so you get to meet and see a lot of the industry that you're interested in through those experiences. And a lot of times, if you're in the right programs, those could be paid for. And so those are other ways to be exposed to things as well that you can use for experience on resume, but also give yourself exposure.
I would say you don't know what you don't know. So understanding that ties back to all the things we've said over the last hour. Ask yourself what you're interested in. Figure out what that is, and then dive deep, okay? And if I were in y'all's shoes right now, let's say I decided I'm really interested in e-commerce or cybersecurity. I would learn as much as I can, and I would document that with blogs and with vlogs. So I would be videoing myself, doing screen recording of me doing a project, and then I would post that on LinkedIn, and I would make a write-up about it. I would look for people who were doing podcasts on cybersecurity. And before you know it, 6 to 8 months in Milwaukee, you'll be seen as a cybersecurity expert, and you'll be asked to be on panels for cybersecurity and to give talks to middle schoolers about cybersecurity. And you'll continue to grow your network in that way. To me, that is the best way to balance experience with education, is to document. In the formal education setting, you're doing homework and you're documenting it that way when nobody's really seeing it. But when you're out there doing your own projects, you document it for other people to see. People love to follow the journey of individuals and to see folks grow and evolve. That's a really great way to get your brand out there.
Thank you.
And while some HR people might not admit it, they are doing unofficial background checks on you and going to your LinkedIn, because whether you know or not, HR professionals can pay this fee and they can search LinkedIn profiles without it showing up on who searched you. So, yes. But what you should know is we do unofficially do background checks, and we look to see what you're doing on LinkedIn. We look to see what you're doing on Instagram. We look to see what you're doing on Facebook, X, all those places. So if you are showing up in those places the way you want to be seen by this new employer, they're going to look it up.
Oh, good to know.
LinkedIn is my best friend, just so you know. I check my LinkedIn more than any social I have. The way I found my job at the Sherman Phoenix was on LinkedIn. LinkedIn sent me a note saying, your job skills match up to this posting, because I had a little thing in the background on LinkedIn that it wasn't to the public, because you can put open to work to the public, but there's also prompts where in the background you can say that you're open to work. And so LinkedIn will send emails. And this particular time, they actually just sent me a message saying, your skill set matches up to this role. And it was in the middle of the pandemic. I actually applied to the job from my bed, from my phone, because I had my resume saved in LinkedIn. And that night, the recruiter called me. And 4 interviews later, and I was the first full-time hire of the Sherman Phoenix Foundation. And 2 years later, and been promoted from executive director to president CEO. We've won awards as an organization, so I've continued on the amazing work that was already started for me. But it was all from LinkedIn. Most of my community partners if I didn't meet them face to face, it's because we met on LinkedIn, or they inboxed me on LinkedIn, or we saw each other's profile there, or somehow or another we're connected via LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's me again. But I had a question. So, all of you have done really amazing, great stuff. And sometimes I feel like I do that too. I want to do amazing stuff, but sometimes I find myself wanting to prove to be someone. But at times, I am someone right now. So,
Absolutely.
so like, is that type of mindset, like, I should keep on going? Like, should I
Yes.
always strive to become someone, or just, hold on into the authenticity of myself?
Both. Become her, become you. And I think you've been saying that. Write down what you want and grow into that. Be happy with who you are. Be proud of who you are. But we're always growing, right? I'm growing. I'm in my next transition, right? I'm always setting goals. And so you're always going to grow. But I'm also very proud and will stand very strong in who I am now as I'm growing to become whatever my next, I call it my cat lives, right? I'm transitioning to a whole nother life in this moment, but still very proud of who I am right now. Yes.
I have a Post-it note, and I think I'm trying to remember when I updated. I think it was in the pandemic, and it was the Divine Seven was on, and I had 7 things that I wanted to do. One of them was create a DEI curriculum app, online training. One was to open or do a food hall. Didn't do the food hall, but I became the executive director of a place that has food, entrepreneurial hub. So that worked. I wrote that I wanted to start a photo booth business. Did that, and so I have this Post-it note that every time I sit at my desk, I have to look at it, and then I can evaluate myself and say, okay, what am I doing, to get to the things that are on this list? And now I think I've done 4 or 5 of the 7. Well, kind of, sort of, like I said, I didn't open a food hall, but I do work at the Sherman Phoenix. Close enough.
Girl, you did it. That's manifesting.
Close enough. The other thing is every year, so do any of you make or the vision boards at the beginning of the year?
Yes.
Mid-year? I made mine electronic, so I put it, I have it, my vision boards on Pinterest, so that I always have it with me in my phone, and can always reflect on it no matter where I'm at, or when I need a check-in, or what, okay, it's June, ooh, we're 6 months in. So, just little things that you can look at and look at yourself, and you don't have to share these things with anybody, because it's just between you and you. You're your own. You are your biggest competitor. So it's not. You shouldn't have to try to be. You are enough. You are more than enough. And you remind yourself of that. And you're going to empower it yourself.
I have this thing. My parents are always trying to make me a little bit more humble. They're boomers, so they always think I'm a little bit too cocky, but it helps me. I have a saying, "Delulu is the Salulu," so it's okay to be a little delusional. Like if I have to meet somebody, I had the pleasure of meeting Vice President Kamala Harris several times. And my dad's like, "How are you preparing for this?" And I'm like, "Well, Vice President Kamala Harris gets to meet me today." And when you have that kind of mentality, right? One, it breaks your nerves, right? You're not as nervous, but also you're able to walk into these rooms more confident and understand who you are and what you bring to that room, right? And people can feel that energy. You go in and you're nervous and you're like shaking, and people think, okay, maybe this person doesn't have all that you actually do have to offer. So it's important to walk into rooms and being as confident as possible, even if it does require a little delulu. I mean, because obviously as Vice President of the United States, I get to meet her, right? But shifting that mentality can be helpful. So I say keep going with that.
Walk in the room and take up space.
Mm-hmm.
Take up all the space you could take.
Take up your space.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Can you give a little advice on leveraging the relationships that you build with other people? I'm someone that I am known a little bit by quite a few people, but I'm really not comfortable with or even familiar with how to leverage those relationships. So could you give some advice to that?
A closed mouth don't get fed. Ask. Like, you have to be intentional. They know me. I don't bite my tongue. I say what I mean what I say. But you also have to be know what their strengths are. You know, are you going to ask somebody that's in your circle? Like, okay, I guess I'm trying to think of an example I can use. Like, would you ask somebody in your circle who is like freshman year? They may have built some websites because it was a school project. Are you going to go, or something that has to do with AI? Are you going to go to them, or would you try and figure out a way to get Dr. Johnson in your circle, who just wrote a whole dissertation, does it, and this is what she does every day, right? But be intentional with, you know, I'm looking for a mentor, and I'm looking for a mentor for this reason, and just be upfront with it. Don't beat around the bush. Be upfront about it, because while the whole time you're playing, you could have gotten to what you need, right? And then what also, you have to reciprocate. When they come to you, you got to be willing to do the same. You know, what's the mutual benefit of this relationship?
And as you're building the relationship, the openness to it, but be, what is the word that I'm looking for? Be sincere, right? If you go in very superficial, you're going to get that in return. And so if you're building relationships, build relationships because you want there to be a benefit. But if it's just a relationship to get a connection, then make sure you keep it at that level. Like, as Dr. Stacy said, it's the honesty. I go into different spaces and I know the level of networking, I know the level of relationship, and I know the ask, right? I know, hey, I'm going to come to Dr. Johnson and say, I know you're doing all of these things. Can we have coffee? Because I would love to talk about the work you're doing. I'm not going to pretend and say, hey, how your cat doing, right? Like, it's, hey, I know what you're doing and I would love to learn more. And so it's more appreciative when it's very straightforward, because then those deeper connections are built outside of, you know, the surface level. So being very open, intentional, but making sure that there's sincerity in that.
Yes, so I was doing my best. The signal's not good here, so I was trying to find the name of this, the author of the book I'm reading, called Reach Out. It's very popular on Amazon, so it's got like a blue cover if you want to look it up. But it is helping me to do just what you're asking, figuring out how to build stronger relationships. I did an audit late last year. I called up about 8 people, and I was like, how am I perceived? And they were like, that's a very you question, first of all, because I'm in data analytics, right? So I just asked them. Saturday morning, I made a couple of calls. They were like, well, people know you, like know your brand, but they don't know you personally. And I wanted that to change. So I'm like, well, how am I going to, just not just be known as like Miss Milky Way, but like, like people feel like they have a better relationship with me. And so I've been taking more time now. I put at least I'm supposed to, based off this book, 5 hours or so a week. Right now I'm like a 1 hour a week of doing like intentional networking, reaching out to individuals, setting up lunch, breakfast, coffee, Zoom calls, and having like really good conversations to learn about those individuals, but also to share more about myself. And sometimes not even just to figure out how we can collaborate, just to know who exists in this ecosystem, and to let folks know that I care enough to learn more about them. So that's something that I'm working on. I won't pretend that I'm an expert, but I do think that it is important for you to be intentional about it. And so I'm glad that you're focusing on this now at such a young age. And the last thing I'll say there is I think it's important, as I've mentioned earlier, just to be authentic when you're having those conversations. Like that was previously mentioned, be as sincere as possible, because people pick up on that And so don't just go in and come with a ask right away. Make sure that it's a reciprocal conversation.
I would also say for all of you to begin, I think someone alluded to this earlier, start joining professional organizations. So I'm a member of Tempo Milwaukee. I'm a member of Professional Dimensions. I was member where I became board members of different organizations, because the networking, like I say, your network is your net worth in these circles is amazing. And the opportunities that they will afford you, you'd never get if you don't put yourself out there.
Thank you to our panelists for answering the question and comments are Dorothy and Achiever Scholarships. So